Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for attending today's webinar. Excited to walk through all the content we have for you today. We will hang out just another 30 seconds or so, allowing folks time to join, and we can go ahead and get started, but super excited to dive in today. All right, well, with that, let's go ahead and kick it off here. Like I said, we are very excited to be walking through the content today for you in understanding the new EPA PFAS ruling. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us today. A couple quick housekeeping items before we launch into the meat and potatoes here. Please reference the GoToWebinar control panel as you've signed in today. We absolutely want to address and properly answer any and all questions that you have. So feel free to chat those in using the question box in the control panel as you see on the screen here. There's also a couple additional resources that have been uploaded for you to consult as well. We have our product compliance program guide for you to consult, so feel free to download that. And then we also have a nice one-page handout that kind of outlines 8 key takeaways. So feel free to take advantage of those additional resources. But we absolutely want this to be a dialogue in as much as we can address any and all questions that you have. And as with all of our webinars, certainly we welcome additional conversations. We can have specific questions that you might want to be addressed here in one-on-one conversations, and we can certainly set that up after this as well. And speaking of additional resources, want to also direct you to our website page. We have an additional resources tab where you are able to go and consult a lot of additional items that we have, other blogs, posts, ebooks, previous webinars we've done that have been recorded. You have a library there that you can consult. Also sign up for our quarterly newsletter. We have all the latest updates, changes, both in the marketplace, the regulatory landscape, as well as our product and services outlined in those newsletters, so you don't want to miss those. And then certainly sign up for Source Academy, our publicly available, fully accredited e-learning platform is available as well on our resources page, so certainly take a look there. Speaking of additional resources, wanted to also highlight an upcoming webinar we are planning for January of 2024 as we look forward to the new year. It's hard to believe we're already talking about 2024 at this point, but it's usually one of our most popular in-demand webinars that we do in terms of looking forward for what's new in the new year, right? So here we'll be talking through and welcoming our regulatory experts to further unpack the EPA PFAS changes, EU deforestation, extended producer responsibility, always evolving there as well, the European sustainability reporting standards, and much more. So feel free to scan the QR code on the screen there. Just take literally a couple seconds right now to go ahead and sign up for the webinar coming up in January, where we will be taking a deeper dive look at what's new in 2024. And with that, we will bust right into our content today. So like I said, really excited. Thank you for joining here. We have a good crew joining. So for today's agenda, we're going to be walking through, like I said, the background on PFAS in general. I'm sure a lot of you might know this already, but just laying the groundwork for anybody who's new to the conversation. We're going to dive really deep on the new EPA PFAS reporting rule, and then key provisions of that reporting rule, talking through that in great length as well. And then I'm very excited for this because I'll be coming back to the webinar here to actually walk through pull up the software system to highlight several key ways in which Source Intelligence can help and is helping customers today manage this new complexity. So we're actually going to pull up the system and walk through a couple scenarios, tools and features that are available that companies are using today to help address these reporting requirements. So very excited to do that. We hope that it's a very productive use of your time today, and certainly stick around for that as well. If you do need to jump early, we are recording the conversation, and you will be receiving a copy of this recording, I believe tomorrow. So feel free to keep a lookout for that and consume the content at a later date as well. And then also at the end, we were wrapping up with final thoughts and QA. So feel free to chat those questions in along the way. But before we get to that point, I want to introduce our panelists. I'm here to facilitate the conversation today and walk through how Source Intelligence can help at the end. My name is Michael Reiswick. I'm Enterprise Account Executive here at Source Intelligence, and very excited to be talking with you today. But really, the star of the show is Nikki Johnson. And so Nikki is a panelist here, and she is a VP of Environmental Engineering here at Source Intelligence, and has been working in the environmental compliance industry for over 17 years now. She sits on several IPC committees related to the development of various standards which are used to declare product compliance. Her passion for chemistry and the environment led her to pursue a career in protecting our resources and people with proper substance reporting and regulations. So she's really just in her sweet spot, perfect for the role here, and super excited to be to have her on this webinar. Nikki obtained her bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and master's degree in environmental engineering from Oklahoma State University. So Nikki, thank you so much, and excited to learn from you. With that, I will pass the baton to you.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for that introduction, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I know PFAS is definitely the buzzword these days, and as these more and more requirements pop up, we're just going to have to dig deeper into how they're used within our supply chain. So now let's get to why we're all here, the new TSCA Section 8A7 reporting requirements. Before we dive into the new rule, let's talk a little bit about what are PFAS. PFAS stands for per and polyfluorinated substances. They're a group of synthetic organofluorine compounds which have many uses in consumer products today. PFAS have high persistence and they bioaccumulate when they are released to the environment. Some known PFAS uses include non-stick cookware, firefighting foams, PCB laminates, wires and cables, and stain-resistant fabrics and carpets. These chemicals have been widely used since the 1940s and are contained in many of the products that we use in everyday life. There are currently over 10,000 known PFAS chemicals in use. Now that we know what PFAS are, let's talk a little bit about why they are important and why the EPA has created this requirement. PFAS are considered forever chemicals due to their persistence and the fact that they bioaccumulate. When they are released to the environment, they do not break down, and they are known to move through soil and contaminate water sources. They bioaccumulate in fish and wildlife when they are released to the environment. Humans are exposed to PFAS by eating or drinking contaminated food and water, or by using products made with PFAS. Although the effects are not fully known, research suggests that prolonged exposure to PFAS can affect human health and development. Today, PFAS contamination can be found in all 50 states and in most locations around the world. In accordance with obligations under TSCA, as required by the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2020, the EPA has now mandated that all manufacturers and importers of PFAS and PFAS-containing products should submit a one-time report on the PFAS they manufactured or imported during any year since January 1st, 2011. This reporting requirement includes how the PFAS is being used, the production volumes, any byproducts, disposal, exposure, and any existing information on environmental and health effects. The EPA will use this data to support activities addressing PFAS under TSCA, as well as activities and programs under other environmental statutes. The additional data on production, use, exposure, and environmental health effects may allow the EPA to more effectively determine whether additional risk assessments and management measures are needed. Entities will have 10 months from the effective date to report. Small manufacturers will be given 24 months. Both reporting dates are in 2025, with reports being due in May for large businesses and November for small businesses. No small manufacturer exemptions are in effect for this reporting requirement. Small businesses may be required to report under this PFAS rule, even if they are not required to report under TSCA requirements, such as CDR, due to a small manufacturer exemption. As we were previously discussing, there are over 10,000 known chemicals identified as PFAS. However, not all of these chemicals will be subject to the TSCA reporting requirements. For Section 8A7 reporting, TSCA has defined PFAS as chemicals which have a specific structural definition. The EPA has identified 3 chemical structure definitions which will fall under the PFAS definition for this reporting requirement. Using this definition, the EPA has identified nearly 1,500 PFAS, which are currently found on the TSCA inventory and the low volume claims list, which would be covered by this rule. The EPA determined that a structural definition was more appropriate for the rule than a discrete list of specifically identified substances. In general, manufacturers of substances that do not meet the structural definition are not required to report under the rule. However, substances which do meet the structural definition but are not currently found on the TSCA inventory list are still subject to the reporting requirements. This means that you can't go by any specific list that you found, and if you are using PFAS in your product, you're going to have to review the structural of that PFAS to determine whether or not it's going to fall under the TSCA rule. Although it's expected that the effects of this requirement will be felt throughout all industries, the EPA anticipates that the construction, manufacturing, wholesale trade, and waste management industries will be affected the most by the reporting requirements. PFAS are known to be used both during the manufacturing process and in many of the products that we use today. Some industries like firefighting foams and food packaging have already been faced with PFAS bans. To meet the requirements of TSCA Section 8A7, companies must report on each PFAS they manufactured, including PFAS-containing products, as well as any PFAS imported. A report must be submitted for each year beginning January 1st, 2011 through December 31st, 2022. There is no de minimis value for reporting, and all known PFAS with the appropriate structural definitions must be reported. For mixtures which contain one or more PFAS, manufacturers must submit a report for each PFAS substance contained. A streamlined reporting form is available for importers of articles and for manufacturers of less than 10 kilograms of a substance which is used solely for research and development. They will not be required to submit as much information as PFAS manufacturers. All information must be submitted electronically using the EPA's Central Data Exchange CDX system. The EPA will allow joint submissions in instances where a company will not disclose to the manufacturer or importer certain chemical substance identifiers like the CAS number or the structure due to confidentiality concerns. In these cases, joint submissions will protect the proprietary information while allowing all parties to make the appropriate reports. All records must be maintained for 5 years, beginning on the last day of the submission period. The reporting standard for this rule is information known to or reasonably ascertained by the manufacturer. The EPA defines reasonably ascertained information to include all information in a person's possession or control, plus all information that a reasonable person similarly situated might be expected to possess, control, or know. Examples of types of information that are considered to be in a person's possession or control, or that a reasonable person similarly situated might be expected to possess, include files maintained by the manufacturer, such as marketing studies, sales reports, or customer surveys, as well as information contained in standard references, such as safety data sheets or supplier full material declarations. The reporting standard does not place a testing requirement on manufacturers, but if manufacturers have previously tested their products for the presence of PFAS, then this information should be submitted to the EPA as appropriate. The reporting standard requires entities to evaluate their current level of knowledge of their manufactured products, including the products they've imported, as well as evaluate whether there is additional information that can be reasonably ascertained. The standard carries with it an exercise of due diligence, and the information gathering activities that may be necessary for manufacturers to achieve this reporting standard will vary by case. When there is no existing data to report, the manufacturer or reporter should consider whether reasonable estimates can be obtained or provided. Some companies will be exempt from reporting. Any entity who has not manufactured or imported PFAS or PFAS-containing products since 2011 will not have any reporting requirements. Certain activities which are not considered manufacture for a commercial purpose, for example, non-commercial R&D activities such as scientific experiments, research, or analysis conducted by academic, government, or not-for-profit research organizations would not be included unless these activities will eventually lead to commercial purposes. Likewise, entities importing municipal solid waste for the purpose of disposal or destruction cannot know or reasonably ascertain that they imported PFAS in a waste stream. Therefore, these waste management activities are not within the scope of this rule's reporting requirement. However, the EPA is not broadly exempting all waste management facilities from this rule. Factories that have imported waste containing PFAS other than in municipal solid waste streams for destruction or disposal are likely to have information relevant to this rule. Other waste management sites may have relevant information regarding PFAS contents in waste that they have imported outside of municipal solid waste or for the purpose of recycle or reuse. Thus, the EPA is requiring these entities to report any relevant information they have on file. This would include waste management sites who import PFAS-containing waste for the purpose of recycling or reuse for PFAS-containing products, as well as waste management sites who import PFAS in waste that are not municipal solid waste. In addition, many categories of products are already exempt from TSCA reporting as they are covered by other governmental organizations. These include pesticides, tobacco, specific nuclear material, firearms and ammunition, food and food additives, prescription drugs, and cosmetics. Companies utilizing PFAS for these products would not be subject to the reporting requirements. TSCA Section 8A7 does not have any unique enforcement provisions outside of what is currently outlined for TSCA. The EPA has full authority to investigate any potential TSCA violation they suspect, and violators of Section 8A7 could be subject to fines as high as $46,989 per day per penalty. So if you knowingly have information on PFAS and you do not provide it to the EPA, it could be a very costly mistake for you there. The TSCA reporting requirements that we have been discussing today are just the latest in a trend of PFAS requirements popping up around the world. As you can see from some of the headlines on the right, PFAS regulations are not slowing down. Many U.S. states, including California, Colorado, Maine, Minnesota, and others, have laws banning or requiring the reporting of PFAS. If you're selling products in the U.S., it is important that you understand any state-specific requirements which may be relevant to you. In the EU, many categories of PFAS are already regulated under the REACH, POPs, and the medical devices regulations. There is also currently an open proposal to broadly restrict the use of PFAS under REACH Annex 17. The final decision on that proposal is expected sometime next year. In Canada, many categories of PFAS are currently tracked under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. So as you can see, no matter where you are selling your products, there's a good chance that there are already some PFAS requirements today, or there will be in the near future. This means that knowing if and how PFAS are used in your product is more critical than ever. So what should you do now? How can you prepare for this and other PFAS requirements? The first step is to investigate your product. Are you using PFAS? Do you know where the PFAS is and how the PFAS are being used in your product? You may need to do a risk analysis to determine which components have the most risk for containing PFAS. You will likely need to survey your supply chain if you do not have a full understanding of how PFAS are used in your products. It is recommended that you research your supply chain for all PFAS, not just the PFAS which fall under the structural definition defined by this TSCA rule. If you determine that PFAS are used in your product, you may consider researching alternate materials when possible. When you can replace PFAS with a less hazardous material, it is always best. If you discover that the PFAS in your product can't be replaced, you will need to consider what will happen if your PFAS use is eventually banned. And now I will hand it back over to Michael to tell you a little bit about how Source Intelligence can help meet the growing demands of PFAS reporting.
Nikki, thank you so much for all of that information. Certainly a lot to digest, and we'll continue to digest as you know, all the stakeholders account for those growing reporting requirements. So as Nikki said, the $10,000 question is, hey, how can we help? What can we do to make your lives easier to account for these growing requirements? And so with that, we can go ahead and dive right into some of the nuts and bolts there. To start off, though, just to summarize, Source Intelligence, we're the only solution provider on the market today that can really provide the level of optionality, flexibility, and quite honestly, just the raw technical horsepower needed to collect, analyze, and report on these emerging requirements. We're the only solution provider to provide a true SaaS platform that your team can be using today to automate these processes yourself. We can also provide outsourced managed services or a hybrid model, right? If you want to do some things and you want us to do some things, right? In terms of supplier engagement, analysis, and reporting. The important point here really is, yes, these emerging PFAS requirements are extensive and put added pressures on your teams, but this process doesn't have to break your budget. Essentially, our tech-driven solution can help lower costs compared to other more people-powered solutions that are out there today. So with that said, let's now take a look at just a few specific software features and tools that companies are using today to address these PFAS requirements. So our Compliance Map software platform, as you see here on the screen, allows you to create customized dashboards and reporting widgets to provide real-time visibility and access to your campaigns, status of your parts and suppliers, and overall responsiveness of your suppliers. This PFAS dashboard, for instance, that you're seeing here, provides a real-time, really risk assessment view of campaign responses for PFAS with color-coded indicators to quickly and clearly identify where you need to focus your attention. For example, do you need to redesign product? Where do we need to find alternative parts, etc. Right? Additionally, a big differentiator of our tech-driven solution is that we're basing our PFAS analyses on the largest and most comprehensive data sets available today. You know, our PFAS verdicts are checking against both OECD and EPA PFAS chemical lists, which contain over 16,000 PFAS chemicals, compared to, let's say, other solutions that are out there today that may be just referencing, you know, the 1,400 or so chemicals on the TSCA Section 8A7 list. Thus, really the big advantage of all that, of this comprehensive data set, which is, you know, 10x larger than other solutions out there, is that it really future-proofs your PFAS compliance program. Meaning, you know, we help our customers position themselves to not just satisfy the current PFAS reporting requirements, but in future reporting requirements as well. Given the massive data set that can be leveraged in the future for those emerging requirements that are, quite honestly, not even fully known yet. With that, in addition to providing real-time visibility and access via our PFAS reporting requirements, we have the ability to, the Compliance Map platform gives you the power to explode your bill of materials and really drill down all the way down to the substance level to quickly and easily pinpoint exactly if and where you may have PFAS chemicals present in your bombs. Each part or subpart, assembly, subassembly, your system provides, our system provides you complete visibility to the exact level of data collected via our coverage level indicators that you see here on the screen. These coverage level indicators can clearly display whether you have, let's say, FMD level data, or maybe just partial data coverage, or no data at all. While some solution providers may struggle to provide this level of real-time data coverage and visibility, CMAP does this out of the box, and all of this can be automatically rolled up to the top level bomb, as you see here in this example. In addition to this real-time data coverage visibility, CMAP allows you to easily drill down to identify the PFAS chemicals at the substance level within your products, and we indicate if there is a chemical present on either the OECD or EPA lists, or both, as indicated by the indicators you see on the right. While, again, other solutions may be limited in terms of validating against a smaller PFAS chemical list, the CMAP solution here has multiple chemical lists it checks against, which again totaling over 16,000 potential PFAS chemicals. Moving on, in addition to being able to drill down to the substance level for complete real-time visibility into data coverage on each part, CMAP provides both basic and advanced search capabilities. You can use these basic search features, as you see here, to search your products and parts based on part number, bomb, supplier, by specific substance or chemical, as we see here as an example. We're searching by show me everything that has Teflon in it. And pulling up all parts that contain that particular chemical. And we have more advanced search capabilities as well, as you see, where you can use more advanced logic to create and save your own searches. So in this example, I'm wanting to see all parts that have PFAS chemicals present and that we actually have data on. And so again, with this advanced search logic, I'm able to build this out. I have advanced capabilities to get very nuanced, add additional rules, group rules, and save those searches to access at a future date as well, so I don't have to recreate that. But here's an example of showing me all my bomb items that have a PFAS chemical present, and once I have that, I can drill down all the way to the substance chemical level to see exactly you know, what that chemical is and where it may be included. So again, an example of how I can create an advanced search like that and save a quick search for me to access in the future is very easy, or have my team access at a repeated date. And with all of our views like this, whether it's on a product tree or a part tree like this, you always have the ability to export that data into various formats at the bottom of the screen whenever you need that, along with advanced reporting capabilities to save reports and have those automatically generated and distributed to yourself, to various stakeholders or team members in your inbox as well. So you have visibility when and where you need that. The last thing I want to highlight today on the topic of reporting in general is the reporting and analytics tools within CMAP are really purpose-built to handle the level of complexity and nuance required for these PFAS and emerging PFAS reporting requirements. Users can, as we see on the screen here, users can conduct in-depth BI level, business intelligence level reporting natively within the system by generating powerful analytics. Graphs can be built based upon data using a drag and drop interface. And of course, with all of the data within the tool, it can easily be synchronized and integrated with external databases or source systems that you may have internally within the rest of your tech stack for easy export and use within your own native BI tools or other reporting tools as well. So again, it's impossible to cover absolutely everything, but I wanted to just highlight a couple key features and tools that are, again, being used today by organizations, big and small, globally, to account for the emerging complexities of these PFAS reporting requirements, due diligence requirements, and analysis requirements as well. And so with that, just to wrap up here with final thoughts, I want to thank you for joining the webinar. As Nikki said earlier, just a lot of detail and nuance to account for, a lot of business and process change that's needed to happen, but you're not alone in this, right? We have tools and teams that are equipped and ready to go to help all organizations, from the largest to the smallest, to account for these emerging requirements. And so with that, we do have a number of really great questions here that I see has been submitted. So let's shift our gears here. And if I welcome Nikki back to the stage to help address some of these questions here, we'll kind of take it from the top here and review some of these questions. Nikki, would love to get your thoughts on a great question that's posted here. How do these TSCA requirements differ from what is being proposed in the EU?
Yeah, sure. That's a good one. They're very different. So what the EPA is proposing is a one-time reporting requirement, so they can try to get an understanding on how PFAS are currently being used in the US today, how much PFAS are being manufactured and used in the US today. And then they're going to use that information to determine, what do we do next? You know, do we implement a ban? Do we make this an annual report? You know, it's going to be an information gathering purpose for the EPA. What is being proposed in the EU under the Annex 17 would be a broad restriction of all PFAS. So while the EPA is requesting reporting information, everyone should be keeping their eye on what's happening in the EU, as that would be a ban under REACH Annex 17.
Okay. Another question is, are companies required to submit a report if they've determined there are no PFAS in their products?
Right, so they don't. So I think there was a point on the slide where we talked about people who are exempt. So companies who have not manufactured PFAS or have not imported any PFAS since 2011, they are outside of this reporting requirement, and there would be nothing for them to report.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying here. A lot of good questions coming in here, so keep them coming. Next one, due diligence is too vaguely defined. Do you have a better guide to determine due diligence for EPA TSCA reporting? You know, and then this question or comments, which I think is a sentiment echoed by a lot of folks. I can guarantee most importers of articles will not get sufficient or believable feedback from their supply chain.
Right, yeah, and agreed. And I can give the team some links that we could add to the end of these slides, some reference links. If you're not aware of what's out there, there are some good sort of guides that the EPA has put out with examples of what they consider should be reported and they shouldn't. And I 100% agree with you. If you did not know that you were using PFAS and you did not intentionally design PFAS into your products, and you simply may have imported them in an article that you imported, or maybe they were existing in a component that you chose for a totally different reason and you didn't design in the PFAS, then I would think it would be reasonable that you would not be able to ascertain that information if you haven't done business with a supplier on a product that you sold in 2011 and you had no information at that time. I believe that would not be reasonable to ascertain. There is some language in some of the guidance provided by the EPA that says they don't expect extensive surveys to have to be sent out to get this data. But what they would expect is there are going to be companies that, one, either manufacture PFAS, or two, intentionally designed PFAS into your product. So your engineering team specifically chose a PFAS for its heat resistant materials or other characteristics of the PFAS. So for manufacturers that do have that information available, they're going to be expected to report. And so outside of that, I think it's going to be dependent on, how much data you have available and how much control you had over the design. But if it's not reasonable to ascertain it, then I think you'll be okay to just report what you do know.
Yeah, no, that's great. Just a quick caveat too. This is not legal advice, so we certainly
it's not legal advice.
Run this by your legal counsel as well. But
yes.
We're a good starting point. Follow-on question: where can the streamlined reporting form for articles be found?
Yeah, so again, I will include sort of all the links, and we'll add an extra slide at the end of the handouts that we send out that kind of show you the links to where you can find all of those things. So the EPA does have a good website on this rule that has very useful links to some guidance and to some streamlined reporting forms. So in case people don't know where to go find that, I will add a reference page to the handouts that you'll get after the webinar.
Oh, that's perfect. Next one here. Are you still good, Nikki? I know I'm peppering you, but we got a lot of good questions here.
Okay, good. Let's do it.
Would information known to or reasonably ascertained include chemical testing on articles to identify the presence of PFAS if this information is not known at the moment?
Right. So no, that's one of the things that is outlined in the documentation, that this rule does not place a requirement on manufacturers to perform testing that they have not already performed. That would not be reasonable. However, if you already have that information on file, they expect you to provide it. So that's one of those things. If you were to knowingly withhold information or test reports you already had, that is addressed, that if you have the information on file, you are expected to provide it. But the rule did say they don't expect you to go out and test for PFAS if you didn't already know it was there.
Gotcha. Who is exempt from reporting? Entities who have not manufactured PFAS since 2011, quote unquote. What about imports of articles containing PFAS not the same as manufacturing PFAS? That question.
Right. So lumped in there is going to be, so it's kind of what I was saying earlier. If you haven't manufactured PFAS or you haven't used PFAS, then you don't have to report. And it would be the same if you have not imported any articles, or you don't have any reasonable information to believe that you have imported, then you wouldn't have to report. It's just if you have information, or you can reasonably ascertain information that you may have PFAS, then you need to try and get what you can, even if it's just an estimate or something like that, a scientific interpolation of what it might be. But that would include anybody that has imported and manufactured in that statement.
Perfect. Couple more here, Nikki. Sorry to keep you on the hot seat so long, but this is good. Will the EPA release a list of PFAS chemicals which meet the structural definition that you mentioned earlier?
So yes and no. So they have released it. There is a link out there that is the ones that fall under the structural definition, but these are only going to include the ones that are on the TSCA or the low inventory list. So if they are already on an EPA list, then they will be on the EPA list that's already published, and the list does include the structural definitions of each of those. So that list is available, and I will include that on the reference file. What that list would not include are any PFAS that meet the structural definition but are not currently on a TSCA list. So the EPA is not going out to look at every structural definition of every PFAS in existence today to create an all-inclusive list. They instead are basing the rule on that structural definition, and they expect importers and manufacturers to examine their PFAS, examine the structural definition of the PFAS, and determine whether or not it would fall within the rule, even if it's not on the list that they've provided.
Nikki, I'm going to take this next one, okay?
All right.
Question here says, does the source intelligence platform, can it be based off of IMDS system information? So absolutely it can factor in, right? The beauty of the CMAP platform is its ability to connect to other systems, other databases, and source systems as well. So IMDS certainly can be one of those as well. So happy to have that conversation with whoever asked that in more detail, given your specific use case. Nikki, are you good for two more?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Next up here is, let me find my spot here. There we go. How can we find which PFAS will be in scope for reporting? You might have already touched on some of this.
Yeah, so that's kind of the same one before. On the reference sheet, I will put a link to the Section 8A7 TSCA list that the EPA has put out, but again, with the caveat that you should research for all PFAS. Any PFAS identified, you need to find a chemist or someone who can look at that chemical structure of that PFAS and tell you whether or not it falls in one of the definitions as defined by the EPA. Because organic chemistry is a whole lot of fun.
Yes, absolutely. Other than FMD and SDSs, are there declarations that can be provided by a manufacturer?
I mean, I would think so. Within the world outside of electronics, the automotive, some of those full material declarations may not be available. I think as long as you are requesting from your manufacturers whether or not they are using PFAS, and if they are, making sure that they give you enough information that you can determine whether it would be in scope or not. So just knowing PFAS is there is not enough. You must have the CAS number for that PFAS, and then you must be able to go review the structural definition of it to determine if it's in scope. But I wouldn't say that you must have an SDS or an FMD. Those are just documents you may already have on file. If you're already gathering those, maybe you already have a environmental compliance program in place for ROSE, REACH, any of the other things that have been around for a long time, then you should easily be able to look at that FMD and determine if any of those are PFAS. But a PFAS declaration, so long as it contained all the relevant information, should still be able to get you what you need.
Perfect. Last question. Sorry, I lied. Last question here. Are there concerns that FMDs won't cover PFAS in small quantities or under proprietary labels?
Yes, that is absolutely a concern, because when you think of PFAS and what they are and how they're used, it is very likely that it could be proprietary, and the plastics, the epoxies, the things that people don't want to disclose. And that's where we talked about a little earlier that you may have to do a risk analysis on your product. So knowing where PFAS are used, you may want to look at any, depending on your product types, any heat resistant materials or fabrics you've chosen, any food products that may have that coating on your electronics, any wires, cables, PCB laminates. So knowing where the PFAS are used, you may want to target those suppliers and at least contact them for verification outside of an FMD, because it is very true that it could not be there.
Awesome, awesome. Nikki, you're off the hook now. Congratulations. No, thank you everyone for your tremendous questions. There's more coming in here, but we just simply don't have time to get to all of them. We absolutely could follow up with you specifically to answer any and all questions that you may not even asked here. Before we go though, I do want to point your attention to the next slide here to scan the code. Please provide feedback. It's important to us. Want to make sure that we provide and continue to provide valuable content to you, to the market in general, and certainly your feedback helps us do that. So Nikki, thank you again so much for joining us. It was fun. We love talking about this, and we would love to talk further with each and every one of you, separately as well, because we know that there's a lot of questions and will continue to be questions, which is what we're here for. So thanks again, and appreciate your time, and hope you have a good rest of the day.